We kind of came to this idea for this type of presentation for a number of reasons. First of all, there seemed to be so many people who had interesting voices and wanted to add their voice to this conversation around the exhibition, Yoga, the Art of Transformation. So that was one idea, but also the fact that yoga by its nature is pluralistic and there is not one single yoga. So we're thinking of ways that we could kind of provide all these viewpoints in one program. So we were mining a different form of presentations that are rapid, fast-paced, that really had to kind of boil down to the most important bits of information. So each presentation that you'll hear tonight, the presenter had to do some soul searching, some work, some editing to really distill it in that way that hopefully will really be enlightening and show interconnections between the different points of view. So we're really excited about that. And to kind of also locate some of the presentations, we started out with a question or a prompt that we invited presenters to work with or against. And it was a question that what is it about California that makes it so uniquely prime for the acceptance and development of yoga? It's the perfect environment to cultivate the adoption, evolution, and popularization of a practice in the 19th century, in the 20th century, and today, and inviting each of their perspectives to kind of weigh in as a starting point. So with that, I wanted to thank all of our presenters tonight. Their bios are also in your program, so I'll refrain from reading them. And I wanted to welcome our first presenter, Eric Shaw, to the stage.
Well, I've never done this before. We'll see how much time I have. All right, I want to talk about heat and wealth and wonder, the ways in which the sort of islanded cultures of India and California are kind of parallel each other throughout history, ways in which they play with basic symbology in their cultural memes and ways in which they express themselves geographically and internally. The Orient and Occident come together today. The Vajrayogini is an interesting symbol. She's a goddess who comes from the 6th century Tantra, and she combines in her name and in her symbology the Vajra and the Yoni, the outward-going and inward-going aspects of reality. They come together in the unity that is often seen in the extension of Indian symbolism. One is male, one is female. Here we see in the Indus-Sarasvati seal that comes from the Mohenjo-Daro civilization, those two symbols, 2,900 years before the Common Era, found on the symbol of the Pashupat, the Lord of the Yogis, and they come together in the symbol of the Sri Yantra, which is a tantric symbol of the unity of being, of masculine and feminine, extroverted and introverted. India, throughout its culture, has been an introverted society. It's produced powerful introverted products like yoga, these Indo-technologies that we make use of today, but it's been subject to the extroversion of other cultures, mainly Aryan invasions about every 500 years or so, Cyrus and Alexander and Vasco da Gama in 1498. But recently, in the modern era, India has developed a reformist aspect and an outgoing aspect of its own. The Vajra aspect has asserted itself, a more masculine aspect, we might suggest. And so India has begun to send out emissaries into the world, even as others have come into India to mine its many riches, its wealth, its warmth. One of the intrapots for Indian immigrants, in fact, the first one was Angel Island, like the Ellis Island of New York, but for the West Coast. And here Sikhs came in the early 1800s, and some fought in the Civil War, America's Civil War, and settled in Yuba City, one of the golden cities of California to the north of the Bay Area. India itself has had its own, we might say, west-facing pose, Purvottanasana, in that it has sent many emissaries beginning in the late 1890s, Sivaya Samadhi, a tantric, Swami Vivekananda in 1894, a Raja Yogi, Swami Abhadananda, who actually was the first man to teach postures publicly in New York in 1897. Swami Ramturta came to the West Coast in 1901, as did Premanand Bharati, who taught a form of Krishna consciousness. We had Yogananda, who came in 1920, and my mind is stopping. I'm talking too quickly. I'm losing it. A guy whose name I forget, who taught in California, who taught forms of Hatha Yoga. Indra Devi came directly from India in 1947 after writing her first book and taught in Hollywood. She taught the Hollywood starlets. We had Vishnu Devananda in 1958. He arrived in 57 but came to California, right to San Francisco in 58. And in 1970 to LA became Bikram Chowdhury via Hawaii and Japan. And Baba Hari Das is up nearby in Mount Madonna. He teaches a form of Raja Yoga and Hatha Yoga, vigorous physical yoga practices. The second U.S. tour brought BKS Iyengar to the Bay Area in 1974. And then in 1975, his compatriot, Krishna Patabi Joyce, who taught the Ashtanga flowing style of yoga, came in 1975 to Encinitas, California, hosted by Doug Williams, who had discovered him, and he brought Manju Joyce, his son, who stayed eventually after that. And then TKV Diskachar came in 1986, the guru of Kate Holcomb, who will speak later, and teaching his Vinaya Yoga style. And then lately, Sharath Joyce, the current holder of the lineage of Ashtanga Yoga, has been visiting Encinitas because he started a chain of yoga centers there called Joyce Yoga. A lot of Vajra activity in India coming to America, and particularly California. All those folks came to California. But California, of course, is known for its extroverted aspect. We're perhaps arguably the most extroverted culture on earth, if you take us all together, where California is called the birthplace of everything new. It is the seminal place. It is the place of the Shiva aspect, the outgoing aspect, the extroverted aspect. Its roots are in the early discoveries of the Spaniards in the early 1500s, and they had named it for a figure very much like the Vajra Yogini, as we'll see in a moment. But in the meantime, we take a look at Walt Disney, who is the most profound illusioneer, perhaps, of our culture, who's been the source point for so much of the expression of California's effect on the remainder of the world. Wee-haw! This is talking fast. Recently, Google presented a map of the most Googled words for different parts of the country. And it was interesting that California came out as expensive. My home state, Oregon, came out as good. Speaking of the wealth of this place, it had always been seen, of course, as a place of wealth, where you'd find gold, where you'd find golden cities. The Spaniards came here, and they were a little too early. They named the place California for Queen Khalifa. If we think of California, it comes from Khalifa, the Muslim word for a Muslim potentate. We saw Whoopi Goldberg, who played that part in Disney World, and she also played Queen Elizabeth, who here hosted Sir Francis Drake to also come to this part of the world, just north to Point Reyes, where we have Drake's Bay named for him. And he thought this place was also an island. He called it New Albion, which comes from a cartographer's designation from Phoenician texts in the 6th century, about the same time that yoga was getting started in India. Probably two of the most iconic Vajra yoginis of our state are Angela Davis, who learns yoga across the city across the bay with David Marino, and of course Marilyn Monroe, who's famous for her practice of yoga, which some people say she started practicing with Indra Devi in 1947. India and California are, in their own way, both island cultures. India is boundaried by seas and by mountain ranges, and we both have our celebrations of nudity and heat and sun, that one extroverted, one introverted, the Kumbh Mela, and of course Burning Man. There is a west-facing aspect, a Paschimottanasana, in the attitude of California's yogis to India. It's sort of like the Paris of 1950s art. It's where we return to replenish ourselves. It's the source. It's the place where yoga comes from, and we still find its richest aspect. The yoga industrial complex might be said to consist of LA, San Francisco, and New York. And the extroverted yoga that we're incubating in America has its own special aspect, which is blooming in a unique way in our state among the leaders here. Vajrasana there with K. Patabi Joyce, the Vajra aspect. The yoga of India came from the street. We often forget that. It was founded in an urban culture where there was excess wealth, which would support physical practices that didn't earn money. It is a street culture, a street art, an urban art, and our own urban arts of California are an influence in its own ways as well. Two of the chief yoginis of our prodigious yoga culture, Indra Devi and Shiva Ray, have this Vajra Yogini aspect. Indra Devi brought yoga to the world. Shiva Ray has done important things to fund sources of yoga practice that help people outside of, that have a reformist aspect, helping reform society. And the new aspect of yoga that we see that is an extroverted form, not an introverted esoteric form so much as we saw from India, is led by, we might say, warrior women, Vajra Yogini women, Nischala Joy Devi, Kate Holcomb among them. So we come back to this at the end of my short talk. We take a look at the Vajra Yogini, and we can kind of tweak that name of Califia, California, to give it a name that's a little more expressive of the orientation of our state. California, perhaps, I'm suggesting. And perhaps the latest expression of this extroverted aspect is the exhibit you're all here as a part of today. And that's my marathon talk. Thank you for listening.